Earlier this year, Trump signed an executive order directing the federal government to come up with a plan to make public records related to the assassinations of Kennedy, his brother Robert Kennedy, and Martin Luther King Jr. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has declassified the latest installment of the secret files on the Kennedy assassination, some 80,000 pages. The release of these files is part of a process that began years ago. In 1992, Congress passed the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act, which required the release of all documents related to the assassination within 25 years. In 2017, when the deadline passed, Trump authorized the release of some records, but withheld some, claiming they would cause potential harm to national security. The declassification continued in 2022 with Joe Biden. Then it was indicated that 97% of the material had been made public, but the truth is that there were also restrictions. Now, with this latest release, the National Archives affirms that practically all the documents related to Kennedy's crime, perpetrated on November 22, 1963, are now available to the public. According to the Warren Commission's official version, Kennedy was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald, a former Marine who acted alone, although these conclusions remain a matter of debate. Oswald was arrested, although he claimed not to have killed anyone and that he was only a decoy. 2 days later, he was murdered by Jack Ruby, owner of a nightclub in Dallas, which increased suspicions about a possible conspiracy. Over the years, multiple theories have emerged that question the official version, suggesting the involvement of the CIA, the Mafia, the Cuban government of Fidel Castro, and even a sector of the U.S. government. The lack of transparency in the publication of documents has contributed to the persistence of many of these theories. To give us an idea of who formed the Warren Commission team, one of them was Allen Dulles, the head of the CIA fired by Kennedy, who, of course, was not very close to the president. In 1976, the House Select Committee on Assassinations was created to investigate the Kennedy case. The investigations of this committee lasted until 1978, and in 1979 they issued the final report. In this report, it concluded, among other facts, that President John F. Kennedy was assassinated as a result of a conspiracy in which several agencies of the U.S. government were involved. The Department of Justice, FBI, CIA, and the Warren Commission were severely criticized by the committee for the poor investigations carried out, and the Secret Service was criticized as deficient in its protection of the president. A high percentage of Americans believe that there was some sort of conspiracy. Many researchers have pointed out that after John F. Kennedy's victory in the 1960 presidential election over Richard Nixon, both he and his brother Robert F. Kennedy, appointed Attorney General, implemented policies that made certain sectors uncomfortable. These included withdrawal from the Vietnam conflict, the issuance of interest-free money, the fight against organized crime, and, in Kennedy's own words, the intention to dismantle the CIA into 1,000 pieces. In the history of the United States, 2 presidents stand out who defied the interests of the banks linked to the Rothschild family. One of them was Abraham Lincoln, who allowed the government to issue its own currency, backed by the trust of the state, without resorting to central banks and thus avoiding interest payments. This act, considered patriotic by many, cost him his life, as he was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, allegedly linked to the interests of that family. Currently, control of currency issuance in the United States rests with the Federal Reserve, an institution that, according to some critics, operates illegally. The Rothschild family is said to be a major shareholder in the Fed. Kennedy, on the other hand, enjoyed exceptional charisma and popularity, which allowed him to enjoy the support of a large majority of voters. His administration was committed to acting in the best interests of the country, without bowing to the interests of the Fed bankers. Like Lincoln, Kennedy pushed for the issuance of U.S. dollars directly from the Treasury, without recourse to Federal Reserve bills and without generating interest for the banks, as provided for in the U.S. Constitution. This decision deeply alarmed the Fed's owners. a high percentage of Americans believe there was some sort of conspiracy. Even the famous American historian, Dr. Michael Parenti, concluded that of some 600 books published on the Kennedy assassination up to 1996, no less than 80% attributed the assassination to a conspiracy linked to U.S. intelligence agencies. Historian Jefferson Morley, an expert on the case, told the Washington Post that the released files could contain more than 3,500 documents previously censored in part or in whole, with up to 15,000 pages of information, plus another 2,400 FBI records. Many people who have studied what has been released so far say the public should not expect shocking revelations, but there is still a great deal of interest surrounding the Kennedy assassination. The possibility of obtaining significant new information is undoubtedly very attractive to researchers, although we imagine that the most interesting files will not come to light, but we will keep an eye on them.